Welcome to the Wire to Wire podcast. As always, it's me, your host Yusuf. Now, I came across different topics, themes, and storylines that I found to be very interesting, so I dropped another episode that you guys can check out as well. Now, before I get started on this episode, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, without further ado, let's just get right to it. So 50 Cent recently did an interview with radio host Big Boy, and shout out to the both of those brothers, but shout out to Big Boy. You know, he is a legend and an icon in the game. And I enjoy many of his interviews because he shows his guests love, but he's also fair and he asks tough questions without trying to set them up or hit them with an I gotcha moment. But also too, he'll push back or ask for clarification if he doesn't really understand what the guest is trying to say. And from my observation as someone who does podcasting and who is a student of the game, I noticed that he approaches his interviews with a lot of emotional intelligence. And it's that little nuance that really separates him from others. And it's something that I really respect about him. But he had 50 Cent on the show. So you know that whenever you have 50 as a guest, it's going to be equally entertaining as well as insightful. And 50 is also someone that I really respect and I have a lot of regard for. And he's an icon and a legend in the world of entertainment, music, and even entrepreneurship. Now, interestingly enough, I actually met him back in 2015. But that's a story that I'm going to save for another time. Now, if you guys can get me to 1 million subscribers, maybe I'll tell the story. I don't know. We'll see. No promises. But they discussed a wide range of topics from 50's various projects in television and film. And he also revealed some interesting stories as well. And there were certain things that he said in the interview that really caught my attention and that I wanted to expound upon, because I think they're very relevant and applicable. Now, the first of which is when he's telling a story of the 2022 Super Bowl, so last year, how it came to be, and some of the politics and things that went behind it. Now, I'm going to roll the clip, and then when we get back, I'll elaborate on my thoughts and what we can take away from it. And of course, as I'm playing the clip, remember that this is fair use. I'm only doing this for commentary, educational, and reactionary purposes. Now let's go.
Do you think that anything had to do with like the regurgitation of like, man, 50 with Super Bowl? Like, because when Super Bowl went down, everybody like popped up and popped off.
That was big. Like look, Dre, that's Dre too. You see what I'm saying? It's Dre and really him because he wouldn't do it without me.
Right. How does that come about? You know, because we get, you know, I kind of knew some things low key, but once that Pepsi ad hit and it was like Super Bowl, when did it come about? Like, how did 50 Cent become involved?
Well, I got the call before the ad went out.
Yeah, I hope so.
But look, when I wasn't in the ad,
right,
because of look, Jay-Z and them was putting it together. Mm-hmm. So I think they still harbor some energy towards me.
You think you were purposely left out of the ad?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think. I think that they were saying the NFL had some issues with me that I don't know what those issues are. Like, what is the issue? You see what I'm saying? Like, and I with M, because like with Nori he had communication. He said, yeah, I talked to the big homie. You saying, told Jay, he was telling me, you know, the white boy wouldn't do the truth without 50. Right? And I'm like, that's when I start saying crazy stuff, because I look and I go, oh, that's your big homie, right? And so he imaged himself after a gay painter. The big homie want to look like a gay painter.
What are we talking about here?
We're talking about Basquiat. He wants to look like a gay painter.
Oh, my God. I think I know where we're going with this.
So now, look, what I'm saying to you is, look, when you start looking at, that's not mine, that's theirs, they Harper, right? But when you look at, M is looking at the entire legacy.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole thing, like with M, Dre, and myself, like I'm a shady aftermath. You see what I'm saying? Like it do so much G-Unit Records.
Right.
They forget that I'm M and Dre's artist. You see what I'm saying? Like, but that's just the way it was. Like,
Were you a part of it? Even like you say, you weren't on the ad, right?
Yeah.
When we saw the initial asset that came out,
Huh.
and you weren't on there, but were you already a part of it?
No, I already had communications
okay.
with Paul about going to do it, but the ad was coming out that already was shot with.
Okay, gotcha.
With him and everybody else in it. So I'm like, nah, cool, I'll be surprised. Like, it's cool to be surprised.
Right. Yeah, I was surprised too. I remember at rehearsal, I was like, man, what the hell?
I won $20.
Right.
Yeah, me and Louis betted against it, and I was like, Fitty's going to show up. Watch.
When nobody, like when I reach out, because I want to see what the complications are, when nobody has any information about it, and it only came from that angle, I have to believe that was something that's from that.
Did you and Jay-Z ever have a conversation, or y'all in different offices as far as like?
We don't need to talk about nothing.
I heard that.
Yeah.
All right. So when you do get the call, it's a no-brainer for you to do Super Bowl.
Yeah. I'm like.
So as you just saw in that clip, he was discussing the Super Bowl and how it came to be. Now, before I give my assessment and my takeaways from that clip, I want to qualify my statements by saying we don't know the story to be true, and we haven't heard the other side. But at the same time, however, I don't really see the need for 50 to lie about something like this, so I'm going to operate under the belief that what he's saying is in fact true. So, I find it interesting that Jay-Z, a guy who has recently been promoting himself as pro-black, a revolutionary, someone who is woke, if you will, that he would try to use his position as a partner to the NFL to try and stop a fellow black man from performing at the Super Bowl. And much respect to Eminem, because he knew the NFL wanted him to be a part of the show, and he used that as leverage to get 50 Cent to perform. So, the pro-black, Wakanda forever, woke Jay-Z is the one who was using the system in place to try and keep 50 Cent from performing. And it took a Caucasian, Eminem, to defend him and get him to perform. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells me many things. Allow me to explain what those things are. So number one, we often complain about systemic discrimination and Caucasian supremacy, if you will, but oftentimes the discrimination that we experience is done to us by our own kind and other people of color. So we need to have a better discourse and understanding when discussing these topics revolving race. We can't associate systemic R word that I'm not really allowed to use on this platform with just white people only. Everyone needs to be held accountable in our treatment towards one another, and I have to call things fairly how I see it. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. It absolutely does. And I will be the first person to call it out whenever I see it happening. But I also believe in keeping things in its proper context. And the reality here is that many times we are our own worst enemy. And that's also a problem that needs to be addressed. Now, what happened in this case is not just a one-off, but it's part of an ongoing larger issue that happens within the community. This crabs in the barrel, trying to block others from opportunities, that mentality permeates within the community. Now, regardless of the field or the industry that you're in, the sad reality is that many of the times, the people that are trying to hold us back or prevent us from moving ahead, they are our own kind. And they're the ones that are doing that. Right? It's the person who looks like you who is oftentimes trying to be the one that brings you down. So with that being as my understanding, I'm not really surprised something like this happened. But I do find it very interesting that it would happen at the hands of someone who claims to be woke like Jay-Z. And This actually leads me to my next point, where we as a society, we have embraced this myth that business is never personal. And that is simply not true. Business is 99.9% of the time personal. Most business deals are closed because the parties involved have some form of personal relationship with one another. It's all personal. But for some reason, we like to sell this illusion as a society that personal feelings or personal opinions don't impact business or professional outcomes. And in the case of the clip we just saw, if it really wasn't personal, then it wouldn't even be an issue, right? But there obviously seems to be a personal rift against 50 Cent on the part of Jay-Z, and I don't really understand what it is. It could be competitive in nature, right? Because at times it seems like they might have an issue, but then other times they're cordial with one another. Maybe Jay-Z is bitter or salty about the fact that 50 Cent had his run in the early 2000s that really impacted Rockefeller and the run that they had going on, right? Or it could be maybe that, they were both signed to Reebok at one point. So it could be that maybe 50 Cent and the G-Unit sneakers pushed Jay-Z and his sneakers out of the framework. Again, I don't know. I'm just speculating here. I do know, though, that there is a video on YouTube that kind of discusses the rift. The channel is Diverse Mentality. I haven't watched it personally, but if you guys are interested in that kind of thing, you guys can check it out. But it appears essentially that Jay-Z let his personal feelings toward 50 Cent cloud his judgment as a partner of the NFL, right? His job on paper is to help put on the most entertaining show possible, but it is also in tune and relevant to what the people want. So the reality is it should have been a no-brainer. You get 50 Cent to come on the show. He is a big part of Interscope. He is a big part of the Shady Aftermath legacy, and he contributed so much to hip-hop and music as a whole. But instead, he tried to exclude him. And that is what actually brings me to my final point. Now, in society, we hear a lot about diversity, and it would be beneficial for white people to support black people in their professional endeavors and to be their allies in professional settings and environments. Well, this is a good example of what allyship and championing someone looks like. And Eminem deserves a lot of credit for it, because he could have left it alone, and that probably would have given him more time to perform more songs during his set, and he could just be like, hey, sorry 50, they just don't want you to come on. But instead, he spoke up and he said, if 50 won't be on the show, then I'm not going to be on the show. And I'm sure the NFL and many of the fans and viewers would have been pissed if Eminem didn't participate. But he pulled Jay-Z's card, and Jay-Z was forced to have to acquiesce, as with the NFL. Right? And that is what happens when you champion someone. And this is a textbook definition of what championing means. Someone who will protect and look out for your interests even when you're not present in the room. Right? Now imagine in a work environment if you had a manager who had a lot of clout and respect within the company or the organization, and they were saying behind closed doors that you deserve to get a promotion and that they are speaking commendable things about you to their superiors. Right? How good would that make you look? Now imagine if you're an entrepreneur and you have someone who will try to facilitate certain opportunities for you. Now those kinds of things can go a long way. And those things are just as beneficial and actually helpful as opposed to token gestures that are just meant to look like they're doing something when in reality they're doing nothing. And this is not one of those scenarios. And this is a great example to show what allyship and championing someone actually looks like. And shout out to Eminem for protecting his interests in a moment when he was going to be excluded. And I'm going to play another clip now. And in this one, I'm going to give my thoughts on 50 Cent's stance when it comes to matters of mental health.
I think the things you go through make you who you are. Mm-hmm. And in my journey, like there's certain things that I'm not really, I don't even let it into my system like that. I think depression is a luxury.
Wow.
Because where I'm from, you can't afford to be depressed. You got to pay the bill, right?
Right.
So you got to go to work. You got to get up. You got to go do what you got to do. You got people right now that's at work that don't feel like being there. Mm-hmm. But they got responsibilities, so they feel uncomfortable while they're working, while they're doing what they got to do. Like, when these guys get in a slump and they just decide that they're not going to do anything, I'm like, where they do that at?
Right.
Even when you're on the street, you got a pack. You just decide not to come outside?
So you guys heard the clip, and some people took exception to him saying this, right? Many people didn't agree with him, but I personally think that this quote is being widely misinterpreted. I don't believe that he's saying depression or mental health isn't a real thing or it's not a real concern. What he is trying to say is that if it ever gets to a point where you're doing absolutely nothing, then you are living a luxurious life. Because the harsh reality is this: a vast majority of people can't afford to just not do anything. Now, many people battle depression, right? Or they have some form of mental health issues, but they're still functioning members of society. That means they're going to school or they're going to work or whatever the case may be. But they can't just stop living their lives and do nothing. Now, food and water have to be purchased. Homes and rent has to be paid for. Bills have to get paid. So doing nothing and just wallowing in pain is not an option for most people. And if you live a life where you could do nothing, but you're still managing to somehow survive and all your basic needs are being met and your bills are being paid, then you are someone who is very fortunate and you are the exception. Because the reality is a vast majority of people can't afford to just wallow in depression and stop going to work and stop going to school and just stop living their day-to-day life. And usually people's circumstances will dictate their response to the kind of things that go on around them. So 50 Cent, as you heard his explanation there, let's look at his scenarios and his circumstance. He was living in the hood of Queens. He lost his mother at the age of 8. He was dope dealing at the age of 12. As an adult, he was shot 9 times. He was dropped from a music label, and he was a target throughout his block. Now, you don't think that maybe he struggled with some form of mental health, or he even had doubts on whether or not he was actually going to succeed in music? Now, in his case, maybe it was a lingering thought. But the thing is, he was not in a position in his life where he could focus on those thoughts or even give in to them. Right? So in his case, he literally had to make things happen because his entire life was dependent on it. So when he named his album Get Rich or Die Trying, that's not an exaggeration. It was the literal circumstances that he was in. Now there's many people, obviously to not his degree of status, but everyday working class people who are in a very similar position to that. Now maybe their situation is not as dire, right? But they still have obligations and responsibilities that have to be met. So similar to him, we all have to make shit happen for ourselves or we're not going to survive. And when survival is on the line, your mentality and your priorities start to shift. Now, again, I'm not saying all this to speak down on mental health or to marginalize it in any shape, way, or form. Now, I am a firm believer in people going to therapy, seeking help, and focusing on adaptive ways rather than maladaptive ways to resolve their issues. The reality is, in some cases, and not all cases, but in some, I want to make that clear, a good remedy is to occupy your time and mind with productive things, right? And when you're focused on that, it helps to alleviate sometimes the pain that you are dealing with. Now, obviously, there are clinical and medical concerns surrounding mental health that are not to be downplayed. And that's not what I'm speaking about here. And I don't think in that interview 50 Cent was talking about that either. This is more so applicable to people who are in ruts or they're just feeling down in general. But pushing forward in your work while using your downtime to maybe focus on meditation, self-reflecting, or even taking up an activity such as journaling, it can be helpful. But in order to combat those feelings of being in a rut or feeling down about yourself, it requires being proactive in some respects. So staying still, doing nothing, and just wallowing in pain is actually counterproductive and can do more harm than good. And the reality is, most people are not in positions to live that way and still maintain their day-to-day life and meet their basic survival needs. And that's why he used the word luxurious, and I agree with him from that perspective. But before I close off this segment, I really do want to emphasize that if you're experiencing any mental health issues, you're ever having thoughts about self-deletion or hurting yourself, or just in general, you need someone to talk to and you want to work through these things, be sure to seek help from a medical and clinical professional so they could assist you in your recovery and help you discover healthy, adaptive ways to overcome whatever it is that you may be going through. It's very, very crucial that you do so. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and you can check out my 4 books. The link will be in the description. Until next time.